Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to our little presentation on performance benchmarks that matter, focusing on the audio space. So today, your speakers will be myself, Christy May. I am the product marketing manager at Podscribe, and joining me on stage is Camden Weber, who is our senior director of partnerships.
Thank you all for joining us. We're super excited to walk through our quarterly benchmarks report. If you're familiar, this is going to be an abridged version, so we're excited to walk you through. But appreciate everybody attending to dive into some data.
Yeah, so before we get started, just a little quick intro to what Podscribe is. We are a leading independent and IAB certified omni-channel advertising measurement platform. That was a mouthful. But we provide measurement and basically helping advertisers, publisher, and agencies understand their ad performance in the audios and honestly omni-channel space, multi-channel. We turn the data into clear, actionable insights so that there's no more guesswork. You can see it all on our dashboard. And as Cam said, this is an abridged version of our PPB, which we publish quarterly. And we provide a ton of insights to the audio industry so that you can kind of benchmark and understand how your ads or your campaigns are performing in comparison to the rest of the industry. So we are having a webinar next Thursday, August 28th at 12 p.m. Central Time. If you'd like to scan the QR code and register, that'll be there. We'll be doing a deeper dive into the full benchmark report with all the data. Don't worry, I'm going to go to the next slide, but there will still be a QR code.
Awesome. So let's get into some fast figures. These are going to be the metrics that help feed this analysis and allow us to arrive to these benchmarks and norms, giving advertisers, agencies, and publishers the ability to understand how the rest of the industry is doing across these key metrics. So some of the data that's going into this analysis, we're looking at just podcast data for this abridged version. We typically do also provide a side-by-side for podcasts and streaming audio. But this, we call it our Q3 PPB. We're actually reporting a rolling 12-month time frame to look at those trends, look at those benchmarks, look at those conversion and visitation rates for, in this instance, 66,000 campaigns. We've got over 200 advertisers in this view. This is actually a smaller sample size than previous campaigns just because some of the data has been getting way too large to work with. So we sort of trimmed some of the edge cases, filtered out some smaller campaigns with insignificant volumes and less statistical significance, but 17 billion impressions that are helping us calculate these metrics. So looking at some of the core KPIs that we measure, we've got our visitor rate, 0.25%, which is higher than the previous PPB. We are, for the first time, reporting out on the cost per visitor that podcasts are driving with $7. We have our conversion rates of 0.015%, which is actually lower than the previous PPB. But I will call out that these conversions, these engagements span the gamut of what the activity could be. So this could be as simple as, hey, install my app, or hey, come create an account, it's free, all the way to high-end furniture of buying a $3,000 couch or a used car on Carvana. So that's why we do see a larger cost per acquisition, just taking into account that this is spanning every type of advertiser, whether it's a free promotion as a conversion or a larger significant purchase. In our last PPB, we announced this first view of our survey multiplier as well as our promo multiplier. So traditionally, without the use of pixel-based attribution, advertisers and agencies were relying on promo codes and vanity URLs to understand the ad effectiveness of their media. With pixel-based attribution, we have sampled and identified that for promo codes, that you're missing 80% of the total attributable conversions without the use of pixel-based attribution. and it's even a greater deficit when it comes to post-purchase surveys, and we see a 7x multiplier would need to be applied to post-purchase surveys to fill the gap that pixel-based attribution is capturing. And it is, the correlation between those two are validating to see that you have to work less hard for promo codes. It's easier for a consumer to enter a coupon to get a free shipping or to get a discount off or to support their favorite creator, but they have to volunteer to fill out a survey. So it's validating to see that correlation between promos and survey multiplications. We also did the first ever podcast reach curve a few quarters ago. And this is still looking at just podcasts, but we are, for the webinar, presenting the combined view of both podcasts and streaming audio to see the uniqueness of those audiences, the overlap, and the aggregate reach that you can enable, and how many impressions it would take to reach both the total podcast universe and the total streaming audio universe. So looking at some of these metrics, it would need to take 1.25 billion impressions per month to reach the total addressable audience. We don't have it captured up on the screen, but if you were to draw a circle in that very lower left-hand part of the graph, that's where 99% of advertisers are today. And you can see, if advertisers wanted to reach 75% of all of the podcast listeners, just a measly 500 million impressions per month, and we can do that.
Okay, so how many of you are currently buying programmatic? Show of hands. Okay, not that many. But how many of you are monitoring frequency? Oh.
A couple. Okay.
Oh, not that many.
Historically, in our PPBs, we have always looked at the advertiser frequency on a per campaign or a per placement basis, which typically the trended data confirms that the lower frequency on the placement, the more unique reach, typically a frequency of 1, shows the best results for a visitation or a conversion rate for that individual podcast or episode. With this PPB, we're looking at a holistic view, so for podcasts in general, and it tells a bit of a different story. We're looking at a 5x, a frequency up to 5x. Those 5 frequencies in average are giving us a 0.34% visitation rate, as well as a 0.026% conversion rate. In comparison to frequencies of 6 or greater, we see 5 or less is 53% better at driving visits and 22% better at driving conversions. So when it comes to monitoring frequency, if you didn't raise your hand, you may maybe want to consider keeping an eye on frequency to ensure that your campaigns are getting in as many unique years as possible to drive those advertiser KPIs. Looking at run of network, we'll refer to run of network and programmatic sort of interchangeably here across some of these slides, but looking at run of network versus episodic buys, we do see a similar trend of previous campaigns or previous PPBs where episodic crushes run of network from a visitation rate and from a conversion rate. We've got 0.41% for episodic, 0.24%. Nearly half of the visitation rate from an episodic buy. But it does tell a different narrative when it comes to the cost per acquisition. In previous PPBs, we've been seeing a trend that run-of-network campaigns are getting more and more efficient. I think 2 quarters ago, there was a 38% difference between the performance of episodic versus run-of-network. The last PPB, we were looking at a range of a 13% difference. And now this Q3 report, we're looking at a 6% difference between the cost per acquisition for run-of-network versus episodic, which is, there's a lot of assumptions that we can start to make around that we'll dig into around smarter targeting, getting more efficient, more familiarity and time within programmatic podcasts. But it's great to see that there's parity between run of network and episodic buys from that cost per acquisition standpoint.
Yeah, that's quite a jump.
Just to give some insight into the scale of volume that we see when it comes to programmatic campaigns, these are the total monthly volume of impressions that we've tracked in the past 12 months. And just looking at the growth from a percentage, share of impressions that programmatic has been given across agency and advertiser campaigns, we're more than 2x the volume of run network impressions this time last year. Just in June, we had 32% of all of the impressions, all of the campaigns that we tracked for podcasts were a run of network buy. And again, more time, more familiarity, we can dig into some of those interpretations in I believe, the next slide. Mm-hmm. So there are some theories, are we just getting smarter, right? Like with any skill, the more reps we get, the stronger we build that muscle, the more familiarity we have with it. Are we increasing our confidence in making those buys and applying those learnings on subsequent campaigns? Is there better data? Are we looking at ways to cut and slice performance to make these targeting decisions and optimizations? Are there device insights? Are there audience insights? Are there geo insights that we can leverage those learnings for upcoming or future campaigns? And are we seeing changes in the technology? Are we getting better algorithms? Are we getting frequency capping? Are we getting better predictive targeting? All of these things could be, mechanisms to why we're seeing so much of an increase in lean into run of network. And would love to hear, after this, grab me if you're experiencing any of these or others that you'd like to share. So
You kind of built it up, but just thinking about like programmatic now and the increase of that, what kind of levers are available for a run of network campaigns? And we're going to show you some of the data that we found at Podscribe, starting with performance by device.
Yeah, absolutely. So getting parity with digital style buying on programmatic audio. We have visibility into performance by device. So we've got a comparison between Apple and Android devices. You'll notice those two percentages don't add up, the percent. There is another category of other that may include things like smart speakers, smart watches, smart TVs, smart toilets, etc. But looking at this, we see that the visitor rate and conversion rate, as well as the cost per acquisition, are significantly better across the board for Android. Again, there's assumptions that we can make, and I know there's studies around, just overall affluence or household income that we see with Apple devices versus Android. But just looking at the metrics, if I were a marketer, I'd be shifting more impressions to Apple devices based on this data. Looking at that breakout as well by device and application. So we've got Apple devices, Apple Podcasts, Apple devices on Spotify, and Android devices on Spotify. Very similar narrative. We're seeing a stronger conversion rate on both the Apple devices for Apple Podcasts as well as Apple devices on Spotify. Again, these are insights that you should be looking at, should be leveraging to make adjustments, make optimizations, and have a more efficient campaign based on the narrative that we can interpret based on the data.
Yeah. And in addition to by device and application, we can also break out the data by DMA, which is designated market area. And here you can kind of see that Chicago's the top winner here with the lowest cost per acquisition at $133, but outperforming in both visitor and conversion rate. And we see New York and Los Angeles are kind of like solid performers with pretty balanced visitor, conversion, and cost per acquisition, whereas Seattle, on the other hand, is the worst performer here with the highest acquisition cost at $194, by far the most expensive, but pretty mediocre visitor and purchase rate. And we go a little further, and we'll look at the performance by state, kind of like, as you noticed, we were just talking about Chicago being pretty well, performing pretty well. We also have Illinois and Florida here, topping the charts with some higher visitation and conversion rates, but a very low cost per acquisition compared to California, on the other hand, with 129. Very costly to target that area. So something to look at and consider when you're buying. And next we'll look at performance by host read ads and producer read ads. Here we have the median visitor and conversion rate, and you can see that host read ads are relatively better performers compared to producer read. As you can see, like host has 0.3% versus producer at 0.28. Don't really want to read off the slides too much, but we'll go on to the next one. And we'll take a look at return on ad spend and cost per acquisition. While host read ads are clearly performing better, they are a little more expensive, just 5% more expensive. So you make a decision there determining based on your budget and maybe what kind of campaigns you're running and what it would matter to you. And next we have performance by show genre.
Yeah, so this is looking at the genre of podcasts that we see across those run-a-network and programmatic campaigns. And it sort of spans the gamut when it comes to the difference between visitation and purchase rates. But looking at technology, it's doing a great job at driving visitors to the site, but not as good of a job at driving conversions or purchases that we find with business. So leveraging these types of insights, especially with a run-of-network campaign where it may be your intro into audio and you have no clue which types of shows, which types of genres that you should be considering, this is a great way to test the waters. Have a larger share of impressions get spread out and see what rises to the top. What can we identify? Are there certain types of shows, certain types of genres that audience is really resonating with our ad stimulus and responding, coming to the site, checking out our about me or making a purchase. All of this is just super useful information to your entry into audio or finding a genre that fits best for you.
Now that we kind of built this up with all this data, what if you've never ran a programmatic campaign? And honestly, based on the show of hands I saw earlier, it seems like a lot of you have not. So you might be wondering, where do I start? Well, Cam's going to walk you through a scenario on maybe how you can start running a programmatic campaign.
All right, so this is a super simple, dumbed down example where, how do we baby step into programmatic? And so here we've got our Baby Inc. advertiser. They have these assumptions about who they're trying to reach. They know it's a baby-focused brand. They want to reach families. They set the targeting and they start delivering ads to families and households that have children present in the household. Parents make a purchase and it's verified or validated. Hey, they're purchasing. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. We're going to keep targeting parents. But another approach could be, to target everybody. Take that wide array of audiences and see, are there hidden nuggets of strong performers that you would have not expect? Maybe we do cast that wide net and we see that it's not just parents, but it's parents and dinkwads.
What are dinkwads?
A dinkwad. A dinkwad is a double income, no kids with a dog. So maybe they're planning for a family, but they're responding well, and you wouldn't have known that this type of household or this consumer persona was a good contender if you were only going off those initial assumptions or biases. And that finding, right, with targeting a larger audience is that, hey, households can change their life stage. They could be, no kids in the household now, but they are a good contender because they're thinking about that next chapter. So again, with that very silly example, what does that look like after we've launched that campaign? Casting that wide net to capture those unexpected, those hidden gems of audience opportunities that break those norms or biases that you would have expected. Start broad and build that scale to gain the campaign momentum. Typically you would like to give the attribution window most of its full time frame to see and allow those impressions to mature, to get a larger sample before you really sink your teeth into the data and make some more drastic optimizations. But use good data. Use the insights that we talked about, if they're available within your DSP, if you're using a third-party measurement provider, this is all available in Podscribe, but then optimize those campaigns based on which devices, which publishers, which apps, which geos, which genres, which days of the week, which time of day are driving and moving the needle. Again, this is that shameless plug that this is a quarterly report that we do for publishers. We make this data available for them to see how their inventory, how their shows, how their campaigns perform against these benchmarks, so they can evaluate and see where do they sit in the stack of an omni-channel or an omni-publisher campaign. Getting insights of like, am I in the middle of the pack? Am I in the top of the pack? Am I at the bottom of the pack? What are my conversion rates and visitation rates for my specific shows in comparison to this benchmark data? Similarly with advertisers, how are my campaigns performing against these benchmarks? If you're overperforming, that's great. Keep doing it. If you're underperforming, maybe a time to reevaluate and make some smarter decisions.
Thank you all for coming. Thanks for your time and attention. If you would like a copy of this deck, you can actually scan this QR code. It's going to have you fill out some information, but it's quick, I promise. And if not, you can just scan it and fill it out later. You'll definitely get a copy of the deck. And if you'd like to request a demo or keep the conversation going, you can also email us at partnerships@podscribe.com. You already met Cam here, but we also have a wonderful team also in the audience. We'll be here, but let's take some questions while we still have some time. Any questions?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah, assuming you had $100,000 to do an ad spend, and let's say you were a podcast, or maybe even a podcast network, what would you do with that $100,000? Where would you do that, or say it was $1 million or whatever? What percentage where would you allocate that? Whether it's in different platforms, Spotify, or targeting specific podcasts. Where have you seen those dollars have the best bang for the buck?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you had mentioned from the perspective of a podcaster or from a advertiser. Podcast. So, and if I'm hearing you correctly, that may be in the sense of like trying to drive new listeners, new subscribers to your show. Okay, that's super helpful. So I would say we aren't necessarily the media buyers. We do work really closely with media buyers, but in other instances, there are examples of heaving up within the first week, the first month, maybe 20 to 40% of that budget in a programmatic buy to, like I said, cast that wide net and get those initial earnings. I would say generally I would try and spread those impressions and that media budget over the course of 3 months, 2 to 3 months. Typically, we're looking at and recommend giving those impressions 30 days to see if that consumer is going to take an action. With podcasts, right, an impression is a download. A download is a listen. It's all the same, but we don't have visibility into, nor nearly anybody have visibility into, did that consumer actually listen to that episode, or so usually a longer attribution window. So I would say heaving up in that initial month with 20 to 40% of that media spend, and distributing it through the remainder of a three month time frame.
I'm just curious about the data. How much is this pulled from B2B versus B2C brands?
We actually have that. We'll have it in our full webinar. Do we have Matt Dringler here? I would say, and you can give me a head nod or a head nod, that maybe B2B makes up 10% of these impressions. Awesome. Any others? Okay. Well, really appreciate everybody coming out. Hope everybody has a great rest of your podcast movement. Safe travels home if you're taking off tonight or tomorrow. Would love to chat. Feel free to come grab us, and really appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you.